Good morning. Man, Blair, great presentation, and I couldn't think of a better one to go before this one because we're also talking about cost share programs with ARPA. And also, I'll just plug that I am a current VCAP participant. My project for 2 rain gardens in my backyard in Bon Air has been approved. And these very good timing. I think I applied at the end of June and was approved in August for folks looking for a timeline. And we're going to go to construction in October. Should take about a week. I'm looking forward to it. Anyway, I'm going to set this. That's not going to work so well. All right. So to the presentation, good morning. I'm happy to be here. My name is Lauren Linville. I am the program team lead for the Clean Water Financing and Assistance Program at DEQ. And today I'll be presenting on the Septic Local Partner Program. It's a new initiative for DEQ made possible by the American Rescue Plan Act, or ARPA, federal funding. So, a quick personal note here. September 26th is an important day to me. The guy you see up there, my stepfather, throwing the bunny ears, would have turned 75 years old today. And so as I was putting together this presentation thinking about today, I was thinking about him and what he would think, seeing me up here in front of all of you talking about septic systems. Because when he passed in 2015, what he knew of my life and what I was doing at the time was I was an English major who somehow got into talking about stormwater and rain barrels in DC for the River Smart Homes program. So, like I said, I think that if he knew I was here right now, he'd say, no crap, or the other word, you know? To which I would say, yes, exactly, that's the point. Like, we don't want the poop. So I think he'd be surprised because of that history. But we're not surprised, right? We work in water quality. We know that water quality is a function of how well we we are managing human and animal waste when it comes to water. So that brings me back to the subject of today's presentation about using how DEQ is using the ARPA funds to invest in septic assistance for today and beyond.
I bet you'd be very proud of you today.
I appreciate that, thank you. I was really calm for thinking about it, saying that today, and then I got a little choked up thinking about, actually saying it now. But I appreciate that. So outline what we're going to be covering today. So I'll talk about how we developed, how we were given this charge from the General Assembly and how we developed the Septic Local Partner Program at DEQ. I'll then go into how we've been soliciting projects and then where we are with implementation today. And then lastly, at the end, I'd like to kind of gaze optimistically into the future and think about what the future of septic assistance might look like in Virginia beyond ARPA. So first, I mentioned that I'm the program team lead for the Clean Water Financing and Assistance Program at DEQ. And what clean water financing is, our mission is to provide low cost or cost-effective funding solutions for technical assistance to localities, organizations, citizens to protect and enhance water quality in Virginia. And so the funding solutions we're talking about, referenced in our mission, really boil down to these programs you see here, and maybe you're familiar with some of them. The Virginia Clean Water Revolving Loan Fund, this is a low interest or no interest loans to localities to upgrade wastewater treatment facilities, but also install stormwater BMPs, brownfields remediation, land conservation, et cetera. We also manage and administer the Stormwater Local Assistance Fund, or SLAF. So that's going to be more in that stormwater. That's a state grant fund program. We also manage WQIF, the Water Quality Improvement Fund. So that's going to be for wastewater facility upgrades. Also the Combined Sewer Overflow Fund. And then lastly, our most recent grant program would be the American Rescue Plan Act, or ARPA funds. So a little background about where ARPA came from and where we are now. So ARPA was signed into law in March 2021. And really it was meant to help states and governments recover from the COVID-19 pandemic. As a part of that law, they established the state and local fiscal recovery funds, which were direct appropriations to states, millions and millions of dollars. And the purpose of those funds was to contain the impacts of COVID-19 on communities, residents, and businesses. How wastewater infrastructure got mixed up in with that kind of funding is more of a question for Congress, but these funds, wastewater is one of the only eligibilities along with broadband infrastructure, the only eligibilities for like capital construction projects within that bill. So that's how ARPA came to be into law. The money was appropriated from the US Treasury to Virginia, and the General Assembly then, over 2 special sessions, one in 2021 and one in 2022, appropriated about $585 million to DEQ, specifically for these projects. That said, there was one pot of, most of the funding, that 585, was directed to very specific localities, like City of Richmond, City of Alexandria, for their combined sewer projects. However, there was one pot of funding that was the most open-ended. It was $75 million, and we could use that for septic, straight pipe, sewer collection system repair, replacement, and upgrades. And that was it. That's all they wrote in the appropriation bill. So very open-ended to use over those uses. So then it was up to DEQ to decide, okay, how do we implement? How do we take that $75 million and distribute it to communities? And so we developed an implementation plan, and from that $75 million, we carved out $5 million, and we said this is going to be for septic local partner program, so septic assistance. And specifically, we wanted to use that funding to solicit local partners who could help us reach into their communities and fund things like septic repairs, septic replacements, and connections to public sewer. Because we know malfunctioning septic systems aren't good for anybody. What was also interesting about this pot of funding that DEQ got was that they also gave money to VDH. You may be aware, they gave VDH about a similar pot of money, just over $5 million, to use on septic repair, except they placed an income restriction on it. And they said that anybody accessing those funds had to be at 200% of the federal poverty guidelines. And so, worthwhile, but really limiting who could use that funding. And we know that septic persists outside of that, issues exist outside of those income restrictions. So kind of knowing that about the VDH ARPA funding, and then also being aware of the 319 funding that's available at DEQ. Blair mentioned it in her presentation about the other 319 program, the other septic program that they were borrowing forms from. So that program has been in existence for a while, providing this type of assistance. But that program is only limited to residential properties, and they can only implement it in implementation plan areas, which if anybody has any experience with those do not follow the boundaries of a county. They're very particularly shaped and refined. So again, you're limiting participation. The money that we got didn't have any of those limitations, not income, not geographic. So we tried to think through, okay, how could we apply this funding that would fill in those eligibility gaps? Could we fund things like businesses in trailer parks, which hadn't previously been eligible for this type of funding through other state grant programs? And so that led us to our implementation plan. Sorry, I also need to follow along my notes here. All right, so we got the money, Virginia got the money from the US Treasury, the General Assembly gave it to DEQ, and then our program got it. And we started thinking through, okay, how would we direct partners to even administer this funding? And we developed what we called the program design. And this is the document that lays out how our local partners would interact with the residents, the rules for this program, so that if you were in Henrico County and Henrico County were providing this assistance, you could go to this document and know, am I eligible? Is the project I want to do eligible? Is how will they evaluate my application and prioritize it? Those type things. So we developed a template that then our local partners could refine to better meet the needs of their communities. So we developed the implementation plan, we put up this program design, and then we decided to go to solicitation. So we finished the implementation plan spring, early fall 2022, and then on October 15th, 2022, we opened the solicitation, and we invited local partners to apply to run one of these programs in their areas. And we held that through October 15th through December 15th of 2022. We received 16 applications from that process. A note, the only folks who were eligible to apply for it were local governments as defined by Virginia Code for the Virginia Clean Water Revolving Loan Fund. That's just kind of the eligibility-wise how it worked out. So local governments meant that it had to be city, county, town. PDCs were eligible, as were utilities. So those were who were eligible to apply for the funding. We received 16 applications. We then evaluated those between January and March. And then in April 2023, earlier this year, decided, okay, 15 of these projects are really worthy. And we think that we need to proceed with them, that there's something here. So we decided to authorize 15 of the 16 projects. The 16th project was ineligible. And we ended up authorizing $8.2 million, which exceeds the $5 million we set aside. We did that, and we kind of settled on doing that because we wanted a flexible approach for these applicants. We wanted to see who could meet us at the finish line, who could move the quickest. It's important to note that 13 of the 15 we selected were folks who had not previously set up a septic assistance program before. The two that had were PDCs who had funding already through either the loan program and or the 319 program. So they were kind of well aware of this, or they had VDH funding. But 13 of those were brand new to this, so they were gonna need time. So we gave them some time and the ability to show us if they could meet the deadlines and help us spend this ARPA funding. So this is the map of those localities and then a list there. Now this list and these localities aren't ultimately where the funding will be. These folks need to meet they need to execute their grant agreements, they need to do their program design, I'll get into that in a minute. They need to meet some deadlines for us before we will confirm their pot of funding, reserve the funding for them. But generally, I think this map is interesting because we're seeing it concentrated in the eastern side of the state. And I think part of that is large PDCs covering several geographic areas, but also we're seeing rising water tables, which is impacting the type of septic systems that you can replace. So right now you may be on a conventional system. If that thing fails, you're not replacing it with a conventional system that'll cost $12,000. You need to replace it with an alternative system, which will cost $25,000. And so the need is really great in those areas because of the rising water table. So I just think that's interesting. So then implementation, I said, we're asking people to meet us at the finish line. And so that program design from our implementation plan, we've asked them to focus on tailoring that program design and getting it to us by the end of this month in 4 days, so that we can review it and approve it. And then once they have, so say they get their program design approved, we have to then go to grant agreement execution by the end of March 2024. They have to spend their first dollar for the BMPs, for their first cost share dollar for septic projects by the end of March 2025. And then they have to have 50% of the grant spent by the end of 2025. The funding expires at the end of 2026. So we're looking for folks who can set up these programs and administer the dollars and get them rolling because they will expire. And once they're gone, they're gone. So what we did after we said, okay, you're the 15, we want to proceed with you. We held initial meetings in May and June, met with each applicant, thoroughly reviewed the program design and talked about how best to tailor the program design for what they wanted to do. Then they spent June through now working on their program designs, submitting them to us for review, going back and forth. And then the next stage for implementation would be grant agreement execution, and then they'd actually start running their programs in their service areas. Oh, no. All right, so implementation status today. As of today, right now, we have approved 2 program designs. So the George Washington Regional Commission and the City of Newport News, we have reserved their pot of their portion of the $5 million for those projects. They still need to make it to grant agreement execution, but they're likely going to be the first ones that will make it that way, and then those grant dollars will start showing up in those communities. Probably at the beginning of 2024. Those who are coming in later, those communities may not feel the impacts or know that this funding is available for their projects until the middle of 2024. And then all the funding, like I said, has to be spent by the end of 2026. And then we've advised our programs to stop accepting applications probably about midway through 2026 because the funding will expire at the end of the year. So you don't want to be accepting applications for a project that's going to take 3 months to construct or a month, that close to the deadline. As far as how you can help, if you're not already a grantee and participated in the solicitation process, but you may know or be aware of people who are looking for assistance replacing their septic systems, we would recommend you direct them to the local health district, which I know that they may be apprehensive about. But the local health district does have resources to help them design their system, the replacement systems. But they're also coordinating closely with our local partners, so they may be aware of if funding is available or not, because we're requiring that coordination from our grant partners with each local health district. We will also be updating our website once we have executed grant agreements, so you could always go to that URL and then find the list of who actually has executed a grant agreement and where these programs are taking place. And then lastly, things that are making me optimistic, because this ARPA grant funding does end at the end of 2026. So when I was thinking about, okay, if we're going to start this program, what's going to happen when the funding runs out? And what makes me feel optimistic about these programs potentially continuing are that the Virginia Clean Water Revolving Loan Fund is an option for them. Everyone who is going to set up one of these ARPA programs is also eligible for a loan. And these are low to no interest, and some have received principal forgiveness in the past. So effectively, they're getting part grant, part loan to administer these funds. They're still loans, and I think most people would prefer a grant over a loan. But if you're receiving a loan at 0%, when your only other option for replacing your septic system at $25,000 would be a loan from somebody else charging you 8%, you might be more inclined to go with the 0% loan from your local PDC. So I'm hopeful that we'll see more of our grantees transition their programs from grant programs to loan programs in 2026. The Middle Peninsula PDC has done this very successfully since the late 90s, so there is a roadmap for them. That said, they've been doing it since the late 90s, and they're still the only ones still doing it. So we know that there are challenges for these grantees to do that. And so we have been, DEQ in our program have been awarded technical assistance funds from the EPA to help us better understand those challenges and then make adjustments to our program, our loan program, to help bring those folks into the loan program, to transition and convert those grant programs into loan programs at the end of ARPA. There are 2 needs assessments that happened in the last year. The Clean Watersheds Needs Survey was a report from the states up to EPA and then on to Congress, pulling together all of the centralized, decentralized, non-point source needs, project needs in the state, and delivering that to Congress. And we reported $2.5 billion in need for septic assistance in Virginia over the next 20 years. So we've kind of used a methodology based on prior VDH permit issuance for new systems and repairs and replacements to forecast what we think the need will be. And we've delivered that number to Congress, and we hope that they act on it, and they will, incorporate that need into their assistance programs. But on top of that, we also have the Commonwealth Wastewater Needs Assessment, which we, DEQ, coordinated and submitted to the General Assembly in June. And because that was our own needs assessment, we could refine the methodology. And what we found through that assessment is that there's actually $5 billion worth of need in decentralized assistance in Virginia over the next 20 years. So we have delivered that number to the General Assembly. And again, we hope something comes of it. We hope that it demonstrates a need for additional funding in this area. And then lastly, you can call it naive, but the Commonwealth has a wastewater policy. The Commonwealth Wastewater Policy, which is to prioritize universal access to wastewater treatment that protects public health and the environment and supports local economic growth and stability. And those words mean something, universal access. Everybody deserves to be able to have access to wastewater treatment. And so whether that is septic or it's centralized, if the state has made it its policy, I believe that that shows intent. And I would to me, it gives me some hope that maybe we're moving in the right direction. So those, ARPA is short-lived, but I think we have some things to be optimistic about for these programs existing and growing beyond 2026. And then that's the end of my presentation.
On your application process, have you received anything from the western part of the state, or is it just all particularly towards where you're located at now? Our locality, I've never even heard of that process through our department, because that's one thing that I deal with through our public works in Pennsylvania County, septic issues and that type of problem, and getting people's systems repaired, fixed, and trying to find money for that's near impossible. But I see your system set up at this part of the state where all the money is centralized anyway. How about moving it across the state where everybody else can actually get some benefit from this? I think that would be very helpful.
So it was available all across the state, and the localities you saw on the screen were the ones who applied. So it was available for other localities across the state. I know that the 319 program has had success in the western part of the state, particularly I know Mountain Castles ran a septic assistance program with $319. I'm blanking on the one in Washington County, Holston River. So there are other programs, but I was also surprised. Culpeper Soil and Water is another big district that has done a lot with septic assistance through 319 that didn't apply. I don't know. There's certainly a need, and I think in the western part of the state, you get in more to they have their own challenges with putting in septic, rockier property, so there's a need.
District 13, which would be the Danville-Martinsville area, it's right off the southern part of the state. We have a lot of challenges down there, as with everybody else. We got the Dan River running right through there.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of flooding with the other program that the lady discussed. We got a lot of issues with some of that. I've never heard of this program. That's kind of why I was curious. I've been there 17 years, and this is like, wow, this is all new. So maybe something for them to pursue a little harder, try to help move these programs to where we can use them some.
Yeah, absolutely.
Excellent. Thank you. Good program.
Thank you.
Any other questions out there? All right. Well, thank you so much, Lauren.
Thank you.